Hi, everyone. Hi, Lynn. I'm very happy to continue my podcast with a wonderful specialist from around the world. And today I have amazing guest, Lynn Festa from United States. And the topic we choose to discuss, okay, it's a secret. We'll talk about it later. So I would like to introduce Lynn. Hi, Lynn.
Hello, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So I'm going to tell a little bit about you, and you can add some words during our conversation because I know you have interesting story about your own burnout. So we're going to talk about burnout. So I'm going to read some information just to introduce Lynn, my special guest. And sorry if I miss something because you will find more information in the information about this video. So scroll down and check information. And also you'll find more information about Lynn and her web pages, her, her Facebook, and other social pages. So Lynn Festa graduated from Boston University in 1988 with Bachelor of Science in Occupational Therapy. And also she attained the hand therapy certification in 1995. And after that, she worked for many years occupational therapy. And in 2013, Lynn actually found herself burnout. And then she started different study and was enrolled and completed the Martha Beck Life Coaching. And in 1914, underwent intensive training in Darren Ways, which is based on the research of Dr. Brown, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So now she's a professional coach. She has her own classes and own coaching and wonderful speaker, quite known person. And we choose the topic of burnout because, first of all, it's a very actual and serious topic. And secondly, Alina is a specialist in this. She's like specializing in burnout. And I would like to hear myself because I went through a couple of burnouts, and I would like to hear from specialists this very important information. So, Lynn, welcome. Uh, and probably we will start from your own burnout, why you changed this occupational therapy profession, and I know it's serious profession, and then you changed to a completely different profession, also helping people. So you were helping there, mostly physically, and then you have helping psychologically and mentally. So can you tell me about this situation or story from
Yeah,
2016 a little
yeah.
bit, and about Dr. Brown? Because many people do not know who he is, but
Mhm.
I would like you to
Sh-
introduce this doctor. Okay.
Sure. So thank you for having me. Actually, my burnout started, or my awareness that something was off started actually way back in 2012. And I had been a clinician for a long time, had done a lot of interesting things, and I just found myself really just not showing up the way that I had normally showed up. So that's when I started on a little bit of a quest to figure out how to make myself feel better after I'd put in so much time and effort into my profession. So it kind of one thing kept leading to another. I started with the Martha Beck coaching, and then I got certified in the certified Daring Way facilitator based on the
Mm-hmm.
research of Brene Brown. And then I still wanted more because we still want to learn and learn. And then I found myself attracted to the work of positive psychology because we also want to work on what's working. Because burnout is not, it's not a diagnosis. It's not something wrong with you.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think we need to make that very clear too. So that's where I think the positive psychology tools really helped a lot too. So I just kept adding on and adding on to things, and found myself working with people who were burnt out. And I have to say, when I really started lecturing on this topic on a national level here in the States, at least in 2016, it was tricky territory. I have to admit,
Yeah,
because people felt like, they had to like sneak into my room, that something was wrong with them again. So I cloaked it in empathy at the time as a tool, but what I was talking about was burnout. So as time went on, we all know what happened in 2020, um,
yes.
which really blew the top off
Lose the
any
top, I
talk
know.
about burnout. For better, for worse, working with a lot of the tools of positive psychology too, there was some post-traumatic growth where
Hmm.
it's the concept of something that good came out of something pretty awful. Like COVID was actually pretty awful. But what came out of it became more of the dialogue, the open dialogue of what is burnout. So again, for better or for worse. So that's where I've really have been able to shift things too. And for better or for worse too, things that I was saying back in 2016. People started paying attention, and I'm like, yay, that it started coming full circle with that.
As you mentioned, burnout is not a diagnosis, and it's true. And there's a problem is like it's just my opinion, but probably you agree, is that burnout, okay, it's our feeling, and many people do not know even definition of burnout, how to like see this signs of burnout, because usually everybody says about stress and depression, oh, I'm depressed and whatever, right? And then when you mention post-traumatic disorder, and it's not necessary to be a disorder, but post-traumatic reaction of us on some drama, not necessarily physical, but usually it's drama, mental. And again, so they say, okay, this is psychiatric side, like field, right? Depression is psychiatric field. But what if we're not truly depressed? But what if we in this kind of gray area when we don't know what's going on with us, but we feel very, very down and we don't understand. We need help, but we're afraid to ask for help, especially going to psychiatrists, right? So, and what I would like to ask you, can you describe or actually tell me the definition of burnout, like from your point of view? I understand it's kind of not necessarily scientific or whatever, but you have huge experience. So what is burnout?
Yeah, so there's the three classic signs of burnout. Mostly, which I also appreciate that the work of Maslow and Leader started actually in the 80s. So they've also talking about this for decades.
Mm-hmm.
um, so their work obviously now is highly researched, which is, good for them too. But there's three components. The first one is the emotional exhaustion, where that the fatigue, that mental fatigue comings from carrying too much for too long. The second one is known as depersonalization. And that's just like you can't even drum up the empathy anymore. And the caring and compassion is just gone when you're really, a lot of us go into caring professions because we're caring people, and that just goes away, which is very alarming for those of us, and that's how we normally show up. And then the third one is the decreased sense of accomplishment, that no matter what you do, it's just never going to be enough. You feel like you're just in quicksand every single day.
Well, we're talking about depression. Some um, some feelings, some like I cannot say symptoms, but I mean some signs of burnout
Mhm,
included in depression factors, whatever. Like we do this test, depression test, right?
mhm.
And there is some kind of still there is some kind of mm, I would say a little territory when we cannot say that it's already depression or it's just burnout. But would you agree that if you have burnout, so you could be on the way to depression and true depression?
Yes, you could, but that's one of the first things you do is tease out that
Mhm.
it's really called burnout when you rule out the anxiety disorder and the depression. So when you realize, no, I really, you know, don't have a lot of the like as anxiety as a clinical disorder or depression. So those actually get ruled out. So you know really what you're working with. So
I see.
again, knowing the problem is half the solution is one of the things that I always kind of key in on. And I think what I appreciate too over the past couple of years, again, we have to see the post-traumatic growth of COVID and everything that we went to, was we're finally having the conversation that it's not that the person who presents as burnt out, that they can't cut it, which is the message that was sent prior to this. So thank God that has come out. And there's a very important term that I think helps a lot, and it's called moral injury.
Wow, I
And
totally agree with you. Yeah.
you're right, yeah.
In Slavic languages, we usually say about moral when we quite often combine like mental, not just moral as a moral. And in English world, moral it's a little bit different. And when you say this, it's interesting because we still come into moral and mental all together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you could, in the English language, I would think value could stand
Well,
in for moral injury.
mhm.
Yeah, somebody just came up with moral injury, so we all have to work with it. But a lot of it's because that we're trying to deal with the challenges that basically you're trying to treat your patient, trying to work with your student, with your clients, but you can't because of the constraints that are beyond your control. So I think that's really important. So it becomes like, what is more the system problem versus the person problem? And that's where I really appreciate the shift finally, is that we're starting to talk about that. And I think one of the really important things that people can take home is that we ignored the systemic and institutional factors for far too long. Again, you were told you just can't keep up. And I try to use in my presentations, for those of us who have a certain age, especially in the States, grew up with I Love Lucy. And there's that classic scene where Lucy and Ethel are trying desperately. They start out fine and they're working along the chocolate factory. And then it speeds up and speeds up. And next thing you know, they're trying to shove the chocolate everywhere. So I use that as it just becomes out of control and they just can't keep up. It has nothing to do with them, but look at that. It's like a systems problem.
Yeah,
So
I
I think
agree.
it's nice that we're finally having the conversation that it's not so much about the person. Now, what I love to bring up is that sometimes, I always have people when I start to work with people is to actually do an inventory too. And I use that because the inventory of asking, are you, so is it the chicken or the egg? And I think there always is a little bit of burnout. Obviously, the moral injury can lead to burnout, so it can look the same. But knowing the problem is half the solution, so we know how to address it, right? So there's
Yeah.
no one secret or miracle work for, like, we can't just say, if you're burned out, do X, Y, and Z, because everybody's different and everybody's situation is different. So we all approach it differently. So I love to do it in two different ways. So if it does, now that we're talking about it being a systemic problem and a top-down problem, if people understand one thing, I want them to hear that it's a top-down problem. It's set by the leaders. So if you're a leader that actually wants to address this with your team, you have to stop and ask why.
Yes.
And one of the simplest free ways is to stop and ask people what they need. And ask those questions. Really simple. How are you? What's worrying you? How can I help? And then take the time to actually listen to the answer. Now, I always kind of get in trouble with this too. And they're like, no, don't say that, Lynn, don't say that. And I say, it's not that people, I say, like, stop bringing people lunch. And I'm not asking leaders not to bring lunch because I think it's a really good thing. But sometimes if you're bringing them the wrong thing, that thinking that that lunch is going to solve the problems. So yes, please feel free, buy your team lunch, but do it over the dialogue in an open, honest, non-threatening dialogue.
It's a wonderful idea to have lunch with team or dinner with team. And yes, it's actually make us like leaders, I mean, bosses and team members closer and more open. And I found if we have any problem, I remember when I started working as a chief of department, the young ones, the youngest one among all chief of departments in a hospital. And I saw like negative reaction, who she is to be a boss, right? But what we did, I said, okay, every morning, first of all, I was going through entire departments and ask people, how are you guys? Do you need any help? Do you need anything? And my nurse was writing down all these requests, all these problems. And also we had tea every Wednesday, tea and coffee, and we were gathering together during our break. And I said, you're free to talk to me. And another thing what I did to have a good connection with people, I said, okay, I'm your boss now, and I want to know what's going on inside the department. So if you have any problem, please don't go to my boss, because my boss actually send you back to me. And then you will have a little different face than you have now in front of my eyes. I found that it's like when you trust people and you listen to them, then you have better relationships. Sorry that I brought this, but I mean, burnout, even as a leadership, started when you have problem with the team, right? So when it could be artificial problem, it could be your personal burnout, like dissatisfaction with what you're doing, not achieving some results, right? But at the same time, you start treating people like they're guilty because they didn't do what you wanted them to do. And then we have a vicious cycle. Everyone who listening to us should hear how it's important to have something in common, something that has some value, especially about relationship. And it could protect, and it will protect actually from burnout as a leader and as a worker, as a part of the team, if they deal with something, with some problem. Thank you.
Yeah,
And I'm
excellent.
not
So it sounds like
interrupting.
you're ahead. So I hope everybody gets that. Just sit down and listen. And that's actually one of the tools I was going to make sure that we send people away with some ideas too, because we can sit around and obviously talk about burnout, but we also want to
Mhm.
work on the solution too. And one of the things that is active listening, which we're all taught to, make sure you're listening, which is important. It's almost funny that in 2023, we have to say, okay, everybody, we're actually supposed to listen to each other. But one of the things that I love to quote, and I think it helps put things in perspective, because we also think, I don't have time to do this. Well, you don't have time not to do it. So one of the things that I love to bring up as an exercise when people are
Mhm.
together is I take it off from a paper from 2002 from Langwitz and all. And what he found, him and his colleagues found, was if you let somebody speak uninterrupted for 92 seconds, minute and a half, they will tell you everything that they need to say. The best part is they're going to think you're the best listener, because most of the time people just want to be seen. And of course they want to be heard. But if you let them speak for a minute and a half uninterrupted, they will get it all out. And you're so much further ahead versus, it could go on and on. So that's actually a tool that I have people do in workshops to say, because they're like a minute
Wonderful.
and a half. And they're like, wow, minute and a half can be a long time.
It's a long time, because when I doing like my stories, and usually you can record for 1 minute. So I found how actually much you can say just in 1 minute,
Mm-hmm.
and in the
Yeah.
beginning it wasn't easy, because you have to keep the thoughts during 1 minute, so not interrupt and see if it's recording or not. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, like you worry, like especially when it's first time, how you look, it's you, like, you know, presentable. But it's true. And this technique we use when we have negative person who's angry at you, who wants like to hurt you. So instead of interrupting and say, no, no, I'm not like that. What are you talking about? Like, we usually let the person talk. And when they're done, because usually it's enough only for 1 minute and something of the energy and attention towards you, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're just like, okay, you done? Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because a lot of times that comes from the person may be so frustrated because they haven't felt seen, they haven't felt heard.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it's almost disarming for them to be like, oh my goodness, they're actually going to listen to everything. And then that gains the trust. So if you're working in a clinical setting or anything, any setting, actually,
Yeah.
that's the easiest, quickest, free way to gain somebody's trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. So it's a wonderful technique, and I'm happy you brought it.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up, because, like, who's at fault? Of course, we all want to find like, who's the problem? What's the, who's at fault? Kind of finger pointing and things too. But I feel like, yes, we're having more of the conversation about moral injury. We're having the conversation about unsustainable work practices. So I think that's really wonderful. But also, if you're also the employee, or as I like to call the servant leader, because you have leaders, but we're all leaders in our own way too, and we're leading ourselves. So if you're actually the servant leader, is take some time, and this is where coaching can come in, with like, do your own inventory. What are you bringing to the table that isn't helping your burnout? And that's where, are you dealing with, everything needs to be perfect, and that kind of perfectionism. And that's where the work of Brene Brown is really helpful. That's the Daring Way work. And that's where if somebody comes in, like, it's really kind of intrinsic, everything has to be perfect. The other thing too is like, are you overworking too because you're numbing to stay away from another issue that you don't want to deal with too, which can also lead to working too much. Then too, are you somebody that's not setting good boundaries on your own too? Thank goodness we're finally having the conversations about boundaries, which is everywhere, which is fantastic. And it's kind of like setting them ourselves too, is, I call it BC, before COVID.
Before COVID,
way back. So 3 years ago.
No, it's changed a lot.
Oh, it's changed a lot, that we felt like we always had to be on, and we always had to be available, and we always had to answer the emails. And, when you went away for vacation, you were taking your phone and your laptop, you were never checked out. Well, there is nothing in the world that you can't check. I mean, unless we're, presidents of countries or something, we can check out, and it's up to us to take the rest. So it's not so much to the stress that we're under, it's the lack of recovery that starts to, I use the analogy of creating that scar tissue too. And we can talk about resilience too. That's so funny, because it's one of those words that I'm like, I can't even use that word anymore, because I feel like it took a wrong turn. Like, build resilience so you can get through it, if that makes any sense. And I feel like, wait a minute, what are we needing to work through too? So we don't need to be stronger and tougher. I think we need to be smarter too.
Yeah.
So those are things too, to ask yourself, okay, where am I not setting a boundary with myself or with my team? And things like that too.
And sorry to interrupt you, but because I like your expression about scars, because people think that we don't have scars in our soul, like, it's just like also like expression. But when I was listening to Martin Seligman, his lecture at University of Pennsylvania, I liked when he mentioned that our pain for something negative and bad that happened many years ago or recently could be for a very long time. And to tell the person that you get rid of all pain, all the scars straight away, I'll do everything. It's impossible, because, it's inside of us, inside of our thinking, inside of our emotions, feelings. So it's impossible to get rid if we not ready to get rid. We're still going through the pain, right? And even if we be happy, if we learn how to be happy, and I remember some events from my life still with, like, when I going back to the past, I have pain. It didn't go anywhere. But what's the difference between what I felt at that time and now? I can control this pain. Like I said, okay, it's very painful. I don't want to make it like volcano that again bring me a lot of negative emotion, and I'll start thinking negatively, and I go down. So, and that the scars will stay there. And it's I think important to tell people that it's okay to have pain. It's okay to have scars, but you need to move forward, not go down, but go up, right? And work
Mhm.
with your personality, understand your strengths, and do
Mhm.
not concentrate on the scars, because it's kind of style, like it's in a style to say, oh, all my soul in scars, which is not good. Like, don't mention this. You
Yeah.
need to tell everyone how you're wounded very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, which leads to another really good point. So thank you for that. And I feel like at beginning it was like, oh, you just need to do more yoga.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm like, you can't yoga your way out of burnout. And that's where I'm like, go back and address why this is happening. And of
And
course, like double down
thank
on
you for
self-care
yoga.
and
See,
things like that. But you can't self-care your way out of burnout. Like,
I'm not a yoga person,
yeah,
honestly.
me
I
either.
tried. I'm not a yoga person.
Yeah.
And I just admit it, but
Yeah.
I'm meditation person, not even
Yeah.
like different type meditation. I just like specific meditation which suits me. I don't want actually to offend any yoga lovers. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no.
no, I think
It's
yoga's
just like
great. I just it hurts my wrist, so I don't do it.
It's just like, I think we need to know what we like, what we don't like,
Yeah.
but not force yourself to do because it's in style. It's like everybody's talking about, it's
Mhm.
popular. So
Yeah.
be yourself, be yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's also important too, is like when you're the leader and you're trying to get a chance. Again, yes, I said buy your staff lunch. I think that's important. But don't think that's what's going to fix the burnout.
Mhm.
Offering, a mindfulness program, of course they're wonderful, but that's not going to fix the burnout. That's going to put a band-aid on things and people will actually be more resentful. Again, it's free to sit down and speak with your team to say, how can I help you? How can we make this better? People
Wonderful.
want to be seen, they want to be heard. So, that's great, to do the fancy wellness programs because they may help, but it's not going to cure the burnout. It will help somebody when they're feeling better from the burnout to get those new neural pathways to create that upward spiral to
Mhm.
have a healthy,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but you have to address why and then fix those for people in medicine. The EMR has been terrible. That's people have talked about that. Now it's like trying to see, too many patients in the same day or just too many projects all at once. So
And
that comes
sorry, I
after.
interrupt you because
Yeah.
recently we got new data that in Great Britain, 40% of doctors age before 45 years old, like, left medicine forever because of burnout during COVID,
Hmm.
because they had such a huge level of fear and burnout, especially burnout, and
Hmm.
people said, that's enough. I cannot stay anymore in the system.
Hmm.
And we have the same in Canada. We have a huge drop in numbers of doctors, and many doctors were like 65, 70 years old. They left medicine. But again, as you said, it's not just a problem personal, it's a problem social.
Hmm.
And if we don't accept that we are not guilty in what happened, we're not guilty. If we stop going, like working on the edge of the knife in the middle of the battle, so here our guilt, here we are not guilty, right? And we try to balance, stop balancing, just get out from this uh, picture in your mind that you have to balance. You shouldn't balance. You just, like, say, I want to be happy. I want to be
Yeah.
healthy, right? And what should I do? unfortunately, many people cannot do this. They still balance it. They still balance it. Maybe I was guilty. Maybe I wasn't guilty. And why? Why? And
So one of the so we notice patterns in our work, right? And again, like everybody's burnout looks completely different. As much as we're completely different people, everybody's symptoms and situations are completely different. But one of the common denominators that I see for everybody is doing the work of Kristen Neff for self-compassion.
Mhm.
Because sometimes when we're so in the hole, we really think that we're alone and there's nobody else. And then that's where I'm saying have the conversations about burnout or helping. So the first, so the three components of self-compassion are the self-kindness.
Mhm.
And I used to say, well, for what you just kind of said to yourself in your head, I said, would you say that to a good friend? And then I say, and if they did say that, would you keep that person as a friend? And usually they're like, no, I would never talk to a friend like that. So it's under that self-kindness of versus self-judgment. And then the one I think that is really important is the common humanity.
Mhm.
You are not alone. That's the one thing
Yeah.
I want to, again, when I started to address this, oh God, 11 years ago now, I didn't tell anybody. I just tried to cloak it and like, oh, I'm going to try to do new things because I felt like I couldn't cut it. But understanding that, again, with COVID has opened the conversation that burnout is a real thing that people are experiencing. And then mindfulness again, which obviously is important versus like being in the moment, understanding,
Mhm.
accepting, because once again, one of my favorite lines from high school, my high school drama teacher said, knowing the problem is half the solution. So once you really figure that out and being in the here and now will actually help you to move forward. So I'd probably send everybody away with
And it's very
getting
powerful
them
words. It's very
yeah,
powerful words. And I think
yeah,
people feel lonely because the self-judgment, like you said, negative self-judgment, when they think it's their problem, or maybe people wouldn't understand, or maybe something else, because nobody wants to hear. I remember I had a couple of moments when I wanted to share my pain or my kind of like negative feelings, not in a way that I just wanted to be aggressive to someone, but just share. And I found even some closest people was looking to me, oh, maybe just go to psychiatrist. Like, why? I'm okay. I mean, I can manage, but it's not what I'm talking about. So I need some support, right? And I
yeah,
found many people do not understand even like how they can help. Just say something good to me, but not like their group of people say, oh, this person is bad. This is like what happened. You listen to it doesn't help me to know that the person is bad and did something bad to
yeah,
me, right? I want to hear how good I am and support me. I want
yeah,
to hear some kind of like everything will be fine. You will be fine. Just you will recover. Don't worry. And we don't have this culture. We don't have actually this education at schools. I think when we learn how to build relationship in a positive way and how to support friends, how to support close people, right? We don't
yeah,
have a psychology and anything related to psychology at schools. And
yeah,
that's why we know very well, like grammar, we could be perfect in physics, we can be perfect in any kind of subject, right? But there's no subject like life
mhm,
and building relationship with people. So when it comes even at school to bullying or some other problem like teenagers have, actually there's nothing psychological, no psychological help. Yeah, we try to protect the children, we try to deal like with abusers, but the perception of negative moments in life, they start before we learn something during our experience and during our life itself, right? And that's probably a problem. And that's we're talking now more widely thanks to internet, and I'm bringing people to let them talk about this, to talk about positive psychology, and not just positive, because we're looking through the positive psychology in the future. How are we going to be in the future?
yeah, and creating that upward spiral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I like this word spiral, yeah, because it's like DNA, like our
Yes, it's
mental
like
DNA.
DNA.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
should understand that we come in sometimes like through the circles, and we
Yeah.
think we feel down, we fall down. We don't fall down. We just going up and up, but through
Yeah.
some negative, but on a other
Yeah.
level of perception of this negativity. But we
Yeah.
have
And
to,
that's actually, again, going back to the work of self-compassion, self-kindness is, in the common humanity, is knowing that the negativity bias is really something really strong in our brain, and we're wired for that. And there's lots of different numbers, like, 3 bad things to 1 good thing, and I've seen it as high as 12. We don't really care about the number, but our brains are wired for the negativity balances. So starting bias, excuse me, to start to really create that. I also try to some simple tools too, that when there's been a day that was particularly stressful, is that you don't want to bring that home, because that's emotional contagion that you're going to bring home to your family. And just basically then you've ruined been a bad day. Pretty much guarantee it's going to be a bad
Mhm,
evening. So I
mhm.
try to encourage people to write, not on the computer, because also you don't want something on the computer too, because there's always that, you can't really delete anything from the computer. And if you're at work, it's a work computer. So I have people write with a good old pen and paper, like the situation. Don't worry about grammar or anything. And just give yourself 5 minutes to kind of vent it out by writing it, the situation. And by taking that time, decompresses you too before you get in the car and bring all of that frustration and anger home. But then if you happen to have a shredder, which most places do,
Mhm.
shred it. First of all,
Right.
nobody's
Or
gonna
burn
see it
it,
because
but not the house.
burn it. Yeah, set off the fire alarm. But shred it and get it away. And it's almost like the noise of the shredder will kind of help let it vaporize a little bit
Wait for
too.
us, yeah.
Yeah. So those are just like some minor things too. I guess we could talk about burnout for hours and hours. I think, yeah, the take home is it's a systems problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's the organization. And then thinking about what we're bringing to to our daily lives too, and take a step back and see where you could make some changes too. So,
Lynn, I'm impressed. Thank you very
oh,
much. I could
it was
talk with you probably for hours, like you said, because I found we have a lot of common and we have very similar perception of this problem.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
hope that all our viewers got something very important and useful
Yeah.
from our conversation.
Yeah.
And also, I believe we're gonna meet again
Yes.
for podcast, or even like
Yep.
we can meet because you live in United States, so we can meet somewhere in time, in place.
Yes, I would
Yes,
love that. Yeah,
and
and
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate.
Thank you for doing these. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for opening the dialogue, because that's also the thing about that I really love is, people think that they're weak, and actually when you own your story, you're actually being courageous. When you're reaching out for support, you're being courageous. So I'm just want to really encourage anybody listening to this, that when you own your story and speak your truth, that's being courageous, and you're definitely headed in the right direction.
And thank you very much for being
Yeah.
with me today.
Oh, thank you. It
And
was really my pleasure to
and
speak
I
with
wish
you.
you all the best.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
okay, bye bye.
Bye.
I did it. I asked for help from the team of International Positive Psychology Association.
Yeah.
Uh, you know why? Because I know there are many people unique. And when I check the social media like Instagram and Facebook, even some group on positive psychology, I was shocked how much, honestly speaking, garbage and junk
Yes.
in these groups. And I said, this is not a positive psychology. This has nothing to do. This is just blah, blah to bring attention. And I met these people, and thanks my education, positive psychology as well, because I start learning more. I said, no, this is not is a positive psychology. You need to know more, because positive psychology, it's mix of science like neuroscience, medicine, anthropology, history, philosophy, and psychology, and of course psychiatry. So it's a mix, but it's scientific mix. And that's why you cannot spread this false information and said, no, we're going to do something different. I'm going to bring these people who are in this organization to talk. Because they need to talk. They need to see that who we are and what we are doing. So this is my way is helping. This is your way is helping.
So
people,
thank you.
Not us, right? But we helping people. But actually learning a lot. I'm learning a lot from each speaker who comes to, to my podcast.
But no, I think I love truly what you did to reach out and get people to speak, because I do feel like, and that's where I love to end. One of the slides I always show is a quote by Rumi, where we're all just walking each other home.
Love is a remedy. And that's why I want to give not just pure scientific data on specific topics. I want to see people alive, not just doctors, not just specialists, clinicians, very serious, and everybody's listening and falling asleep.
Your English is very good.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. Your brain is working triple time.
And by the way, Latin language also is mandatory at school, at medical school. So we had to write in Latin entire case by 90 pages, and it was all in Latin. So some people were still in they stole these cases from other students. I wrote myself, wasn't easy, 90 pages in Latin.
Wow.
But it was me. I wanted to be true to myself. I don't want to cheat. I want to learn this language. I learned this language, and it helped me because it has so many other languages. It has roots from Latin.
Yeah.
And that helps me to understand people even better, understand other languages better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With all our funny accents. Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to meet. And yes, we will meet again. I just know
bye. So have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Yes.